afternoon, good evening, good night to our UWI and WhiteBoard Labs global audience. My name is Sarah Owen. I'm joining you from St. Kitts and Nevis, and I am your host today for another in the series of exciting launch events for the partnership between WhiteBoard Labs and the UWI Open Campus. So this launch event marks the grand finale in a series of events that began with the signing of an MOU between CSPL, better known through the brand of WhiteBoard Labs, WBL, and the University of the West Indies through its Open Campus for a joint Center of Excellence in Industry 4.0. But we'll hear today that we are moving beyond Industry 4.0 because there's so much happening and it is happening at such a fast pace. And we are here to discuss it, we are here to plan for it, and we are here to make sure that the education we provide across the Indies suits the needs of our people in the West Indies, in East India and beyond, because we are global now. Since then, we have benefited from dynamic discourse each and every Monday as expert panels explored Industry 4.0 from the perspectives of students, industry, and today academics, as you will hear from scholars what their research and experience is telling us of both labor market demands and training responses. And I'll tell you, just from the conversation we've been having as we prepared this morning, as we did all of our checks, our mic checks and so on, you are in for a very interesting, exciting, and dynamic panel discussion this morning. So I'm going to share with you something that John Dewey is quoted as saying, which is that education is not preparation for life. Education is life itself. So today we explore that concept across the East and West Indies as collectively we envision the future of education and employment in and beyond an Industry 4.0 era. So I wish to share with you some brief words of welcome and encouragement from the Minister of Education in St. Kitts and Nevis, the Honorable John L. Powell. So he sent in advance a few words of welcome and congratulations to us.
I'd like to commend the UWI Open Campus on this effort and to endorse the partnership between the Open Campus and CSP. The establishment of this virtual Center of Excellence will no doubtedly provide many opportunities for the peoples of both the Caribbean and India. We've seen the benefits and successes when business and technology are merged together. When you look at companies such as Google, Facebook, and many other tech companies, we've seen what can be done. Why can't this happen for the people of the Caribbean and India? And so I congratulate both parties on an MOU and expect great things to come from this, which will be mutually beneficial to both our people.
So we thank you very much, Honorable John L. Powell, for sharing those words of encouragement with us. So as I've promised you, we have a dynamic panel before us today. So we are expecting soon to join us Professor Denzel Williams, who is the Pro-Vice Chancellor and Principal of the UWI Five Islands campus. He's also the Pro-Vice Chancellor for Academic Industry Partnerships and Planning at the UWI, and he is a Professor of International Business at the University of the West Indies. And he's going to share with us his thoughts on global changes in international skills demands. We also have joining us from India, Professor S.N. Kulkarni, who is the CEO of the SEER Oceania International Group, Dubai. He is the advisor to the Honorable Minister of Higher Education in the government of Nagaland, India. He is the CEO of Prof. Kulkarni's Solutions Limited, India. He's the Vice President of the International Accreditation Organization in Houston, Texas. And he is the former Vice Chancellor of not one, not two, but 3 universities. He is going to share with us his thoughts on the appropriate and relevant skills needed beyond Industry 4.0. So as promised, we're taking it beyond where we started and we're looking really at what is happening live and direct as the skills needed as the demands change. We also have with us Mr. Danny Roberts, who's joining us from Jamaica. He is the lead partner at IR Plus Consultants, senior lecturer and head of the Hugh Shearer Labor Studies Institute at the Consortium for Social Development Research at the UWI Open Campus. He's the recipient of Jamaica's 4th national honor, the Commander of the Order of Distinction for his contribution to the trade union movement. He'll be sharing with us his thoughts on labor market demands in the new economy in the Caribbean. And last but by no means least, our good friend, Professor S.P. Singh, who is the principal of St. John's College, Agra. He has been a resource person in various national and international conferences. His work as a research guide has enabled him to publish many papers in acclaimed journals, and his vision is to facilitate the optimal growth of learners and promote their all-round development. He'll be sharing with us his thoughts on the responses to the new training needs by universities in India, specifically looking at the St. John's College experience. So we're going to jump right into it. For those of you joining us via YouTube, via Facebook, we really look forward to receiving your questions, your comments. So please keep them coming in. We will be looking forward to receiving them, sharing them with panelists, and we are looking forward to engaging in discussion with you today. So with that, Prof. Kulkarni, I'm going to hand over to you.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, based on wherever this galaxy of listeners are joining us from. Jai Hind, everyone. I would love to congratulate the WhiteBoard Labs and the UWI Open Campus for getting into this partnership. And it is but natural that while concluding this series of discussions that have happened during this wonderful launch event, I would be taking your focus towards what to expect beyond Industry 4.0. We've been hearing about Industry 4.0, the skills required, and various pros and cons of what the industry has faced. But looking at the way the world is growing, the world is going on, I believe it is absolutely imperative that we speak and think about the Industry 5.0. What next? With all the digital gizmos and everything going digital, unfortunately, including human emotions and relations. It's high time we decided, that we need to do something about it. And as this pandemic has taught us, this is the right time to go back. Go back to everything. I'm happy to join all of you over here from Dubai, which apparently is considered to be one of the safest countries in the world, safest cities in the world right now in this pandemic. And that brings me to the basis of what we look at beyond Industry 4.0. So we are looking at a sustainable, a human-centric, a resilient industry. That is what we are looking at Industry 5.0, beyond 4.0. Isn't it surprising? So what basically we understand is the focus has to shift from a shareholder's profit to a stakeholder's profit. So here we are not just talking about the money a shareholder earns. We are not talking about the tweet that one great guy who runs the Tesla, he comes up with a tweet, and the cryptocurrency goes up and down like the swing bowling of probably Alan Donald of my times. Here we are talking about a more human-centric approach. I'm going to say that once again. We are looking at a sustainable world, sustainable industry. We are looking at a resilient industry. We are looking at a human-centric industry. What it basically means is the well-being of the workers, the well-being of the actual stakeholders of the industry is what is going to be looked at. And we are not just going to look at the shareholders' profits, what shareholders would be getting, which means the industry is going to be equipped to finally give back to the society. We are working at a complete circle. We are going back a complete circle from where we started. So the society needed innovations, the society needed technology, the industries came in, the technologies came in, the innovations came in, human values, the human requirements started going down. We got into artificial intelligence, we got into artificial neural networks, we got into virtual reality, we got into augmented reality skills for industry 4.0. We got into data mining, we got into big data, and then we started realizing, wow, there are robos. We've got robo cafes now. So if I need a cappuccino, a robo will actually prepare everything and even serve it on a beautiful plate. Where are the human beings gone? Where are they? So what is beyond industry 4.0 is the human touch, the human centric touch. We need the human beings back. And here is where we are looking at a sustainable industry, a resilient industry, and a human centric industry. So, what needs to be understood in Industry 5.0 very clearly is we need to upskill and reskill our digital workers. One thing has to be understood clearly: machines and digital world are not here to replace human beings. We do not want to do that. No, it is not a part of what is beyond industry 4.0. On the other hand, the digital workers, they need to be reskilled, they need to be upskilled. And for those of you who are interested, I would want you to go through the industry 5.0 booklets that have come up in the European Commission, the European Union actually. I have been evaluating a few startup projects for the last few weeks in Europe, and it is really wonderful to see the way things are happening. Uh, so if I talk of one particular project, I'm not going to take beyond my 10 minutes that have been allocated to me. Well, lawyers and teachers can never be relied upon as far as times are concerned and timings are concerned. But in any case, so this particular project that I was referring to, I really love the project. They're using augmented reality to basically set up an app which works the way human psychology works. So they are trying to make an app in which they would connect our thoughts, our feelings, our social media with where we would want to visit, what mood we would be in. So if we are in a happy mood, maybe they'll be talking about a romantic getaway. If we are sad, if the boss has been firing me, and I've been firing my colleagues for that matter, then they would probably recommend some place for meditation and yoga and stuff like that. A human centric approach to the technology. So it is not something that one size fits all. So that is where in industry 5.0 we are moving to. We are again looking at the individualism. We are again looking at the human aspect of it. And in fact, when this point of this seminar came up, I was having a debate and discussion. Well, I cannot call it a debate, because I was having a discussion with my wife, who happens to be a former principal of a few schools, and she's a IB educator, an international baccalaureate educator. As every married man would tell you, there is never a debate, it's only a discussion. So, there were lots of things that were discussed. We were talking about, she was telling me that your children need to get into the habit of critical thinking. Your children need to get into the habit of asking questions, relevant questions, and the professors and the lecturers need to have to get into the habit of answering them, because unless they get into the habit of asking what, why, when, how, they would not be ready for the industry. But my point is, with the typical skills that are going around, since the starting of industry 4.0, the human touch has been missing. So I here wish to focus, let me tell everyone who is watching this, there's a galaxy of stars in this group, in the UWI and the whiteboard labs, who can talk about skills relevant for 4.0. They are doing it, they've been doing it, and they have decades of man experience, women experience as well. Dr. Sarah is there as well. So you have decades of experience there. I need to focus and bring your attention to the human aspect of what is beyond industry 4.0. I hope I have not overshot my allocated time by long. Thank you very much for your time and patience. Good thing about speaking virtually is you have the mic and nobody else can interrupt you. Thank you very much. I'm here for your questions and answers. God bless. Jai Hind.
Thank you so much, Prof. Kulkarni. That was, I'm particularly excited about what you shared, because very often when we talk about Industry 4.0, our proclivity is to talk about the technology and what's happening in terms of, as you say, bots, and what's happening in terms of AI. But as we continue to emerge and evolve, it's so important that we pay attention to the socio-emotional skills, the resilience, the vulnerability, and all of these other components of what makes us human and what makes us effective in any particular industry, in any particular market. So I really like where you went with that. I think that was an excellent start. And it's very much in keeping with how we started our collaborations with WhiteBoard Labs at the UWI Open Campus, where we were really looking at exploring these concepts in that very same way, those skills that are with us still, that are so important to the continuation of our industries as we evolve and as we include more and more technology. So we have Prof. Williams here with us now, and he is going to share with us a few thoughts on global changes in international skills demands. PVC Williams, are you hearing us well? We're seeing you.
Okay, good morning, colleagues, good morning.
Good morning.
Everyone is hearing me well?
We're hearing you very well, and we are live on YouTube, Facebook, and very excited to hear what you have to share with us this morning.
Okay, very well. Good morning and welcome, and thank you so much again. Sorry for the mix-up as well in time, but I'm happy to be here. So thank you so much. Yes. Do I have the opportunity to share my slides or no?
I'm sure we can make that. I'm sure we can make that happen for you. Please go ahead.
Okay, I would just like to make a few comments on the topic with some slides attached. So I would like to just share that with my colleagues. Yes.
Yep. Please go right ahead.
Okay, great. All righty. So you should see my slide now, yes? So I'm talking about the future of work, industry future of work 4.0. And this 4.0 came from the notion of the combination of information communication technologies and smart automation, referred to, in other words, as the fourth industrial revolution. And so what I do here is to just quickly show you a few slides outlining how this industrial revolution has actually or will impact the new market for skills, the new market for graduates as stuff going forward. So if you look at this, what you will see is that since about the last 250 years, we have moved from a situation where markets were generally powered by power generation, mechanical automation, things to do with the hand and energy and power, basically human power. And then as we graduate through the stages of those industrial revolution, where quality of life and engineering sciences was really the main thing, we moved up to 2015 thereabout, roughly in the last I would say 10 to 15 years. What you would have seen is that we have moved from a situation where it was just about human ability to power things to one where it is now using the brain. So instead of using, I think they call it brawn, we're now using the brain. And it's really more about how we combine information communication technologies with things like artificial intelligence, etc., smart automation. So if you look at the spectrum, you have seen how we have moved from the days of a steam engine to the conveyor belt, and then to the place where we had general computer and electronic automation, using our computers to do various things, to now moving from the computer, we're using things like artificial intelligence now to get things done. So we're more into the cyber physical system rather than the hard physical system of the computer. And so that in and of itself has transformed the way industry has actually worked. And so what you would have seen is that because of this change in how the industrial structure has worked since the last 250 years or so, what you would have seen is that there is a demand for a different kinds of jobs and a decline in some existing jobs that you have seen. So if you think about it, from the days of the steam engine going through the conveyor belt, if you understand how those things work, you would need people to like be assembling a plant and putting things together. So you need things like team assemblers. In those days, you would need things like cashiers because you were using the computer in its hardware form. You needed bookkeeping and accounting and auditing people because, again, while the computer was there to provide support on the typewriter and those kinds of things, you still needed human energy to do it. You needed data entry peers and all those people to put the data into the computer to do what is necessary. Now that we have moved from that space, and we are now into the cyber automation, smart automation space, as I said, we're on AI, augmented reality and all those things, where they can now literally do the work of a cashier, of a data entry clerk. You know, you can go to the supermarket these days and you don't really need a cashier anymore to be putting in your to be logging in the cost of your goods. You just scan them over the machine and you put it down. You put in your credit card or you put in your cash, even you get back your change. So you don't need a cashier anymore. So what you would have seen is that there are a significant number of jobs that were declining as a result of this emergence to automation and smart automation and information and communication technologies. And what you're seeing now is there is an emergence of some critical jobs that is going to be needed to power that kind of industrial revolution that you're seeing. So what you're generally going to be seeing going forward is big data architecture becoming a big thing right now, because what is happening now that you scan everything, you put your password in everything, you're working with the computer and you're working in cyberspace. Almost every single thing that you do is now logged somewhere. And as a result of that, it gives you a significant amount of data that you can now use in order to make decisions. So you go to Walmart and you buy a Gatorade. Then after you buy that Gatorade in Walmart and you use your credit card company logs it that you went to Walmart and bought a Gatorade. Then after you do the Gatorade, you use your credit card maybe at the gym to pay for your exercises. And then from there, you may use it at Burger King. So they will look at that data pattern and said, for the past 5 months, this is how Denzel Williams or Sarah Owen has been operating in terms of their spending pattern. They buy a Gatorade, they will now go to the gym, then they will eat a burger after. So what you will now have is that they will take that data, analyze the spending pattern, and then say, well, we can target Denzel Williams for Gatorade in terms of our advertisement. We can target Denzel Williams for a burger at maybe 10 or 12 a.m. in the day, because that's when he eats his burger. And so big data now become a very important thing. It tells you what you need to, how you can target your customers, what your customer preferences are, and stuff like that. We can use to target our students to see what is it that they're reading, what kind of course material we need to push to them. All kinds of various permutation happen. So big data analysis is going to be a big part of the future going forward, because there are tons of data around. And this is what is so useful, that once you easily log, you don't even have to have the data entry clerk anymore, because everything now comes with a code and a batch and what have you. You just swipe it over a barcode and all of that data is there. We need automation technicians. We need renewable energy engineers. That is also going to be a big thing, because green is also big. And as you would recognize, the terracotta was just launched a few years ago in Davos by Prince Charles and his team. And from that terracotta, what you will recognize is that the greening of the earth is going to be a big thing. It's a charter, the Earth Charter, for the next 50 years or so. So you need to see how we are going to use those kind of resources to continue the greening of the earth. So you're going to need a lot of experts in areas like those. Organizational development specialists. Again, organizations are changing, so you need to have people who are understanding the changes that they're going through, because as I showed you before from my first slide, from the days of the conveyor of the steam engine right up to cyber world that we're operating now. When you have organizations operating in different realms, then your organizational design has to be more agile to reflect the kinds of industry that you're operating in. So you need skills in those areas. New technology specialists, you're going to need skills in that area. Administrators in information technology, digital transformation specialists. Big issue. This issue of digital transformation is seen as a major project now that major organization, even our own university, is now going through. But digital transformation is not just about the hardware. It's going to conjure up a lot of things. It's also about the changing of the mindset, changing of your business systems, your processes, but also changing of the mindset of your employees so that they can now see the more to operate in a more agile way. So digital transformation specialist is not going to be just your IT guy or your CIO, but it's going to have a combination of people from the HR side, from the technology side, from the culture side. All of those are going to come together, and they're going to know, say, how is it that you transform your business processes, transform your organizational design in order to reflect the new realities that you're operating in. Digital transformation projects are big. There's a large amount of spend on these kinds of things, and people are now looking at how these can actually become a cost driver, a cost saver, sorry, in your industry. Data analysts, again, we talked about the issue of big data and how these things. So these are some emerging skills that you're now seeing in the job market compared to the skills that are declining. So I looked at the World Economic Forum Davos report, thinking about towards reskilling revolution, and it made some important point about the future skills that will be required in the new world. So when we're designing our university programs and we're setting up our classes and we're designing new degree or certificate offerings, these are some important things that we now make sure that our students are having these skills when they leave our shores. And so analytical thinking and innovation is a big thing. Complex problem solving, critical thinking and analysis, active learning. Those are the things that are needed today. Reasoning, problem solving, ideation, influence and coordination, time management is key, because now you're going to have so many things to do. Most of you here would have been, in very senior positions in your organization, and by the time you sit at your desk one morning, everything that you possibly planned would have changed, and you have to do something different. So, you have to have proper time management skill. But your day has changed, but the tasks that you were supposed to do still remain. So therefore, you now have to make sure that you properly manage your time in order to get through your task in an efficient way, because sometimes when you hold up on your task, other people are impacted as well. So those are skills that are thing today. But by 2022, not by the next 50 years, by 2022, some important skills that you're going to need. These very same skills, initial things that you had in 2018, problem solving, ideation, emotional intelligence, complex problem solving, because we're talking about big data and those kinds of things, critical thinking, active learning and learning strategies, creativity, originality, initiative, technology design, all those kinds of things that you're going to need. But look at the ones that are now declining by 2022, and that is important to note as you put your curriculum together. Dexterity and endurance. So what I was saying earlier, physical strength is not really the major thing is going to be required going forward. Precision and memory. We want to just try to remember everything and memorize these kinds of things and stuff like that. No, everything that you want. I keep telling my students when I talk about these things sometimes, Google is one of the biggest libraries in the world, actually. So anything you want, you just Google it and you get it. So you don't have to keep things in memory anymore just to try and memorize to get it going. So all of those kinds of skills are going to be not so necessary going forward. It's just to do with active listening and stuff like that, quality control and safety features, coordination and time management, visual auditory skills and speech and stuff. These are some of the skills that are going to be, that are declining by 2022. So what you now need are the new skills that are coming in 2022 and beyond based on the World Economic Forum data here. But critically, I just need to point out, I mean, the list is there, you can look at those, but critically, what we need to point out are two things. The issue of emotional intelligence. I think that is so key, because what you're going to be seeing now is that you're working in cross-cultural teams with different persons from different backgrounds, with different cultural diversity and stuff. You have to be emotionally intelligent to better appreciate and understand how you bring the team together and making sure that a team actually produces. So a lot of your time will have to be spent in managing how you manage team dynamics. And that is why that is such an important set of skills to teach your students in this day and age. I've always said to my students, for example, that, you know, any course that I now design, all of most of the evaluation techniques will require group work, because it is group work that is now going to bring out all of these kinds of emotional intelligence skills, problem solving skills, the complex skills in terms of diversity and those things. Group work brings that out, and therefore I would encourage that no course evaluation is done in this day and age without some form of group work being involved. So the policy agenda that is going to be needed, therefore, and I quickly run through this. I know my 10 minutes is running very close. But in terms of the education system, we have to think about what type of system we will need to deal with this new normal in the ICT space, information, communication, and technology space, under the rubric of smart automation or the fourth industrial revolution. We have to look at what kind of system we're going to need. And I'm suggesting some quick reform agenda. We can debate these and discuss them further, but we need to look at our curriculum. We need to say, what is it that is in our curriculum? We see the skills that are declining. We see the skills that are increasing. We need to say how those skills are captured in our curriculum. So we need a major curriculum reform to take care of these kinds of issues. The policy agenda, the curriculum reform, we need to look at aptitude and experience. So we need to look at skills that are used to apply knowledge to complete tasks, cross-functional skills, specialized skills, abilities that are range from physical, cognitive abilities that are required to perform the job role. We need to look at years of work experience, years of job and family experience, so that these can help to inform the kind of curriculum agenda that we actually reform. Similarly, we need to look at financing. We need to ensure that students can access all levels of the education value chain. There is an unsettling debate that now goes on in some policy circles about making a choice between primary, secondary education and tertiary education. I will submit in this forum that I think is a very dangerous debate to have. I think the debate ought to be, how do we fund all levels of the education value chain, rather than how we fund one portion versus another portion. So what we need to do is to say, listen, we need to look at funding education in its entirety so that we can give access to people at all levels. The reason being, simply, if you focus on primary, tertiary, and preschool, very important as those are, what they will do, they produce highly numerate, highly literate people. But a lot of these new skills that I just pointed out to you, that we're going to be needing, emotional intelligence, diversity, team building, all of those high cognitive skills, you get them when you move to post-secondary education, or you develop them even stronger when you move to post-secondary education. So to leave it at primary and secondary education, what you're going to do is to produce a lot of literate people, but people who are not fit for the new age that you're operating in. And that's a dangerous thing to do if policymakers are going to make a choice between funding primary, secondary, and tertiary education. Dangerous thing to do. So we need to look at how we deal with that, okay? Establish funding schemes to ensure payback is not burdensome. That's what we need to do. So look at how we fund it, and establish funding scheme that people can be motivated to take their loans or take their grant, go to this thing, get their education, and when they're paying back, it is not a burden. Because the problem why people are not taking their loans and stuff, because it becomes very onerous to pay back. So we have to look at how we allow them to take their loan, pay back, but it's not burdensome, and they can live a decent life. So, ladies and gentlemen, I am saying to you that what we need is a development agenda that should ensure no child is left behind. No child is left behind in Industry 4.0. It requires leadership to implement the plan. Leaders will have to be emotionally intelligent, technical management skills, global thinking, and the embrace of technology. These are skills that leadership will now need to have in order to perpetuate the kind of reform that is needed in the space, so that we can have our workforce ready for Industry 4.0. So I'm going to stop there. I know my 10 minutes is really up, so I will really welcome any questions or any thoughts on this. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Prof. Williams. You have given us a lot to think about, and I really value all of the research that you did in preparing for this panel discussion this morning. And you started off talking a lot about the data and the technical skills that are required, and you ended up in a very similar place to where Prof. Kulkarni started, which was going back to that human element and those types of cognitive skills that will be required, and those types of leadership skills that will be required if we're going to do what we need to do as it relates to the technology and the shifts that we're seeing in industry. So the way that we're going to take this conversation forward is that I am going to invite Danny Roberts to share with us a bit on labor market demands in the new economy in the Caribbean. Then we'll hear from Prof. Singh. And I know that this discussion is going to be extremely dynamic. I don't know how we're going to contain it in an hour, because there is so much already that is bubbling up in terms of the dialogue, debate. So I really like that you've included a challenge in your presentation to us, Prof. Williams, as well. So I hope you can stay with us. I know that you're very busy, and I hope that you can stay with us for that debate and discussion component that's coming right up. So Mr. Roberts, I will now hand over to you to hear what you have to share with us as it relates to the labor market demands in the new economy of the Caribbean.
Thank you, Susan. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Are you seeing my screen?
Yes, we're seeing.
Okay, all right. So let me begin. Okay, now, and the discussion about labor market demands in the new economy of the Caribbean has to be themed around two central considerations. The first is to be able to identify the kinds of job demands that a technologically driven advanced world is designing for the future of work. And the second is how to view the new economy of the Caribbean, whether we are on the outside looking in, or as Vaughan Lewis pointed out, we should be looking from the inside outward. Both considerations are, of course, as important as they are symbiotic, because the new economy must be driven by considerations of social, cultural, structural, and institutional arrangements that meet the primary objectives of the region's development paradigm. That is to say, it must be defined by sustained economic growth, equitable distribution of wealth, social justice, a decent working environment, and a safe and secure polity. Research has shown us that every crisis in the last 100 years, however, has had its greatest impact on the labor market. And in the Caribbean, these crises are seen as both cause and consequence. In the first place, the structural and institutional effects of regional labor markets has made Caribbean economies much more vulnerable and susceptible to the vicissitudes of global crises. And the consequence of that is that there is a prolonged period of recovery from these crises, precisely because of the structural weaknesses and vulnerabilities that are associated with our labor market. And these structural and institutional deficiencies are an inheritance of our colonial past, which we cannot ignore going forward. As the African proverb goes, if you don't know where you're going, remember where you came from. Now, what have been some of the challenges on Caribbean labor market, and how have we analyzed it? Research has been done by Caribbean scholars. Andrew Downs, Professor Andrew Downs from the University of the West Indies in 2006, published a paper on Caribbean labor market challenges and policies. And he identified a number of those problems as youth unemployment, the mismatch between the educational system and the needs of the labor market, the creation of jobs, low levels of productivity coupled with relatively high wages, the immigration of skilled labor from the region, etc. And Professor Downs went on to offer a number of solutions to these problems: educational and training reform, insurance schemes, export promotion, greater social dialogue, revised labor legislations, and the development of a labor market information system. But in addition to the demographic and production changes that Professor Downs identified, he also spoke to what he calls the episodic events, referring not only to natural disasters, but a series of structural adjustment programs which have been introduced by multilateral lending agencies in the Caribbean over time. In fact, a 2004 working paper by the IMF on labor market issues in the Caribbean, scope to mobilize employment growth, pointed to similar structural and institutional weaknesses and focused solutions on, among other things, promoting social partnership to strengthen labor market institutions, revising labor laws, and addressing productivity growth. But what we know is that central to regional economic development has always been the question of integration. And as far back as 1947, in a conference held in Montego Bay called to discuss the issue of regional integration, former Premier and National Hero Norman Manley made the following exhortation. He says that I say here, we are all in a sea of world conditions, stormy and hazardous in the extreme, each huddled in some little craft of our own. Some hardly having oars and only a few have accomplished a rudimentary sail to take them along. And here offered to us is a boat substantial, capable of being made self-worthy and ready to be manned by our captain and our own crew. If we don't leave our little boats and get into that larger vessel, which is able to carry us to the goal of our ambitions, then I say without hesitation that we're damned and purblind and history will condemn us. 6 decades thereafter, in an address to the Caribbean Congress of Labor in 2004 on the role of labor in promoting CARICOM single market and economy, former Barbadian Prime Minister Owen Arthur's declaration remained poignant even today, when he said that the concept of integration rests predominantly on the premise of the superior benefits that can be gained from a process of cooperative development. And it prescribes that perhaps the most valuable course home to any and all Caribbean economies is to have our resources effectively pooled and our approaches to these uses effectively coordinated and harmonized so as to widen the scope and option for development available to any constituent member of the community, and to invest the community with an economic potential that is greater than the sum of its constituents. So the challenge facing the English-speaking Caribbean remains the same, because the precursor to globalization, which was colonialism, had in fact integrated our economies under its hegemonic rule into one single arrangement. We know that there have been nationalist movements across the region during that time of the 30s and 40s, but that led to the institution of the British divide and rule policy to quote unquote release us into what Norman Manley now calls the little crafts of our own. But it is important for us to note that even then, the period of the 30s, 40s, and 50s, in that march to self-government and political independence, that the call for regional integration deepened among the anti-colonial campaigners. Today, the call for regional integration seems somewhat subdued among the post-independent leadership, particularly since the turn of the 21st century. And the great irony in that is that the commitment to Caribbean integration is now being questioned at a time when globalism and a more recent wave of regionalization elsewhere have taken on a new meaning in a post-Westphalian era. In fact, scholars in an edited work on the globalism and the new regionalism in 2020 argued that regionalism over the last decade has taken on new meaning, and that the regional frame represents one way of understanding the emerging global structure. The Caribbean and Latin America, it is said, is becoming North Americanized, even as the global dynamics are shifting, with Richard Bernal's reference to China's global redimensioning as representing the entrance of the dragon in the Caribbean. Some 2 decades ago, CARICOM Secretariat on the Caribbean Development Bank organized a conference of scholars, policymakers, private sector, and NGO representatives to discuss the question of the Caribbean in the 21st century. No labor representative took part in that conference. And except for former Jamaican Prime Minister, the Honorable P.J. Patterson's presentation on mobilizing human resources in support of Caribbean development, no other presenter addressed directly the issue of the labor market. In fact, in talking about the way forward at the conclusion of the conference, former University of the West Indies Vice Chancellor, Professor Rex Telford, observed that charting the future demanded a sense of urgency. A former UWI Chancellor, Sir Sridhar Ramphal, spoke about the moving finger of history at a time when the West Indian Commission report of 2004 shared equally the urgency for Caribbean leaders to recognize that it was time for action in the pursuit of regional integration. So the question we need to ask ourselves is, how far have we proceeded to put in place the recommendations from the 1999 Regional Conference and the West Indian Commission report for regional integration? But that moving finger of history that Sir Sridhar spoke about has been most dramatic in the last 3 years, and Denzel has made reference to that. The future of work, however, has been well documented in the ILO's Global Commission report on Work for a Brighter Future in 2019. And that report recognized, as has been said by previous speakers, the accelerated pace at which work was being affected by technological advances and the fact that today's skills will not match a job of tomorrow, and newly acquired skills may become obsolete in no time. It highlighted the greening of our economies, again, reference has been made to that, changes in demographics, the expanded youth unemployment, as well as aging population and the pressures on labor market where there are no adequate social security protection. It speaks of the countless opportunities which lie to improve the quality of working lives, expand choice, close the gender gap, reverse the damages wreaked by global inequalities, and to create a brighter future and deliver economic security, equal opportunity, and social justice. So what has been the Caribbean response to that? In May of 2019, a couple months after the ILO published its report, regional labor ministers met under the auspices of the International Labour Organization, not CARICOM, and observed, and I quote, that powerful forces of globalization, the technological and digital revolution, global warming and climate change, as well as demographic shifts, are challenging the world of work, and that their impacts on the Caribbean have been devastating, and the implications for the future deeply worrying. That meeting did not include the other social partners, namely representatives of labor and employers. But the labor ministers agreed on 4 overarching recommendations to guide Caribbean countries towards achieving a sustainable development and meet the expectations of the future of work. And what were those recommendations? Explore new jobs and decent work opportunity. And these new jobs would arise in the digital and care sector, as well as the green and blue economies. Adapting institutions of work that take into account the emerging forms of employment and to factor in the importance of the digital care, green and blue economy. Articulating a new social contract arrangement, promoting the use of social dialogue to achieve social justice and social cohesion. And achieving labor cooperation through the ILO Decent Work Country Program to meet the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN. Now, that moving finger of history, in the last 15 months, we have seen where COVID has had its most devastating effect on Caribbean labor markets in terms of its disruption and job losses. And even although a recent ILO publication on COVID-19 and the English and Dutch-speaking labor markets, a rapid assessment of impact and policy response at the end of the third quarter 2020, have indicated that there are signs of a slow recovery in the regional labor market. The Economic Commission of Latin America and the Caribbean, in its May 11, 2020 special report on financing for development in the era of COVID-19 and beyond, have said that recovery will have no positive impact on reducing poverty, as poverty is expected to rise because of the constraints and capital accumulation, which will hamper sustainable economic growth and significantly affect employment. So that the persistent poverty is compelled by those structural and institutional weaknesses Professor Down spoke about, and that has been magnified under COVID. But the region, to varying degrees, also face other pre-existing conditions, which have been identified by the ILO as prolonging the recovery period. And they are to be found in economies with greater dependency on the service sector, higher levels of informality, and weak safeguards against termination of employment. So, in reconfiguring a new Caribbean economy to meet a more robust and sustained economic recovery post-COVID goes well beyond the task of simply identifying the future jobs for the regional labor market. As important as that is, CARICOM leaders must now ensure that robust policy measures are put in place to address a number of issues. One, to address the structural and institutional weaknesses facing the labor market, which have been shaped by an earlier, more open form of global hegemony. Two, to examine and determine the full extent and benefit of a CARICOM single market and economy and the imperatives of a post-COVID regional thrust to deal with two very important things. One, the looming wave of sovereign default, which is threatening small island developing states, as set out in the April 12, 2021 UNCTAD article on small island developing states. And two, coming out of this crisis, the payback for our historical contribution to European development, as expressed in a recent call by University of the West Indies Vice Chancellor, Sir Hilary Beckles, as a matter of urgency. And it is important to note that outside of the ILO, other global institutions, inspired in principle by the Washington Consensus and the promotion of free market policies, including structural adjustment programs, have all been predictable in their assertion that in fact and indeed the region must protect through policy measures its most vulnerable and introduce policy prescriptions that secure the income of the workers and reduce disparity. So in summary and in conclusion, what are we talking about? If we are to reimagine the new Caribbean economy, we ought therefore to be looking from the inside outward. But to do so, we can no longer huddle in small crafts of our own, but must coalesce around our common history, as the managing director of the IMF recently said, coalesce around our common history, culture, and experience into fortifying a regional response to the future of work. But the uniqueness of the Caribbean has to take into account the history of Caribbean labor, which has been a history of exploitation. And therefore, the measures that we introduce to deal with the post-COVID recovery must not only ask these questions, but answer them. What do we see as the socializing function of work? And how will the changing nature of work that Denzel spoke about affect the coherence of our society? We also have to talk as well, not only about the quantity, but the quality of the jobs we are creating, about how work is regulated and the nature of the employment relationship going forward, and the governance of work, which has to be pursued through labor legislations, regulations, collective bargaining, labor market institutions, and social dialogue. So finally, as we embrace the new normal and the future of work amidst the COVID pandemic, the impact of the technology, again, previous speakers have mentioned, will not diminish, but will be intensified. The fourth industrial revolution is now included as a strategic intelligence in the solution to rebuild a sustainable economy post-COVID pandemic. We in the region need to seize on these discoveries for the framing of a new Caribbean reality to make prophetic the words of the Caribbean historian and journalist C.L.R. James, that indeed technological discoveries are the spermatozoa of social change. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Danny. Thank you, Mr. Roberts, for that. This morning, we are really on a journey. So we are on a journey that is really showing us how important, when we consider any revolution, any industrial evolution, that we are looking at an ecosystem really, as it relates to the training, as it relates to the demands, but really, and very importantly, as it relates to the history, so that we can make sure that whatever we do is contextualized within that reality and that lived experience as well. So we really value the discussion that we're having here today. Every speaker thus far has given us a lot of food for thought. And we still have Prof. S.P. Singh, who is joining us from India, and he is going to share with us a bit on the responses to new training needs by universities in India and the St. John's College experience. So we just heard from Mr. Roberts, sorry, quite a bit about what's happening in the Caribbean and the historical context, bringing it from pre-independence times to now. And now we'll hear from Prof. Singh as it relates to specifically within his context at his University St. John's in Agro, what is happening as it relates to Industry 4.0 and training. Prof. Singh, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Susan. I really take this opportunity to congratulate University of West Indies and WhiteBoard Labs for the partnership and for creating this platform. Right at the outset, I would like to set the stage by making an observation, which was made by our Buckminster Fuller in way back in 1982. He observed a very interesting trend. He said that until 1900, knowledge doubled in every 100 years. In 1945, that is towards the close of the middle of 20th century, the pace of doubling of knowledge accelerated, and it started doubling in every 25 years. By 82, it had become staggering, and the knowledge was doubling itself in 12 years. And the estimates say that, the conservative estimates say that by 2021, the knowledge is doubling in every 24 hours. And some estimates even say that it is in 12 years that the entire corpus of knowledge that exists in the world doubles itself. And it has a very serious implication for human life, institutions that have been created to train and equip humans for playing responsible and productive roles in the larger society. The very idea of a scholar, a person who knew or who had mastered the province of knowledge, has become an impossibility. We would need to exist and survive in a world where we would know that we are continually navigating in a world where our share of knowledge is becoming smaller and significantly smaller with each passing day. And that is a very critical and crucial realization as we learn to operate in a world of Industry 4.0, which is the Internet of Things. And today, Professor Kulkarni made a very interesting observation going beyond Industry 4.0 to Industry 5.0, which of course not only factors in the reality of Industry 4.0, but trains humans to navigate simultaneously with the reality. And he used three interesting words. He said that it could be a world which would be sustainable, resilient, and human-centric. Now, India also has been responding to this change. Of course, the two speakers talked largely about global issues. the macro trends, the way transformations are shaping out or panning themselves out at the global level. The preceding speaker talked about, Mr. D. Roberts talked about the regional level, the way labor scenario in the region is developing. But I would probably stick to an extremely localized experience, and that is in the context of St. John's College. To give you the background of the college, I would tell that this college is a mainstream traditional college that has been running undergraduate, postgraduate, and research level courses in humanities, social sciences, physical sciences, chemical sciences, life sciences, and business studies. In last few years, we have, like the entire country, we have become aware of the need to impart critical thinking in our students. Ability, different kind of pedagogical interventions to ensure that even in their regular education that they receive, the critical thinking is embedded and imparted into them. Another very important thing is, more than acquiring skills, we require a mindset, a willingness, a commitment to learn, a commitment to stay flexible, a commitment to be adaptable, a commitment to understand the world, and commitment to commit ourselves to the process of active learning, and incessant and never-ending commitment, knowing that the rate of transformation is going to accelerate with each passing year, and there are no fixed certainties. The only thing that is going to help us is the capability or the inner resourcefulness to acquire new skills and knowledge. And that kind of approach, that kind of mindset needs to embed it into the learners for the future. And instead of priding on the set of skills that they have acquired, it is the mindset and the attitude that they will have to safeguard and guard. Very briefly, within the paucity of time, in last few years, there have been different kind of training programs that we have experimented. Some of them, probably very briefly, I would like to share. I might not do more than just dropping in the names, but probably they will help to understand how a traditional college has been trying to augment the skills of the students by exposing them, by imparting various kind of critical skills that would enable them to be more effective in the workplace. For instance, to just give you an example, in the Department of Chemistry, we had a research center on environmental issues, especially ambient air pollution, and also on indoor air pollution. Now, what we have tried to do is gather certain resources and give a training in environmental activism, understanding that would be a need which is going to arise in the world ahead. As we move towards greater digitalization, the Department of Earth Sciences or the Department of Geography took initiative in equipping students into geotagging and mapping, something that would enable them to contribute more effectively in the areas where they would be actually able to apply knowledge in a world where geotagging is required more and more. We also are trying to kind of develop skills like digital marketing and communication understanding that many students would find opportunities in these segments. As technologies are going, so presentation skills need to be augmented. And presentation skills have become very critical in today's time. We talked about that the world ahead would be human-centric, and soft skills would be perennially important. And we have been running training courses on soft skills, and they have considerably kind of enabled our learners to find employment. Then leadership in today's context, specific training programs on team building, programs which enables a learner to be a content writer, content writing or storytelling are extremely important. We in Agra are in a tourist destination, and I believe that many in Caribbean would identify us in this situation. COVID has been a huge disruptor for tourism industry, and there is a need of creating content for virtual tourism, and we have started kind of working in that direction also, developing media, entrepreneurship, creativity. Then certain other skills like project management, digital, something which enables learners to develop that acumen where they can continually run a project, be flexible in their approach, and adapt to the changes that are continually sweeping the world around them. Of course, as was discussed by my preceding speakers, emotional intelligence is a very, very significant aspect. And probably we require our learners to be emotionally resilient for Industry 4.0 and Industry 5.0, with the kind of changes that they would inevitably bring amidst us would require a very resilient approach to life. And as people do face emotional burnout, we have also been kind of running trainings on mindfulness to calm down, to pacify oneself, to charge one's batteries, and to proceed ahead with a renewed vigor and enthusiasm. So these were some of the training programs, which along with certain industry partners, WhiteBoard Lab is also partnering with us in some of these training programs. And we have kind of been trying to develop portfolio of training programs depending on the requirement, the proclivities, and need identification that we receive from our industry survey. What is important is, probably since I've run out of my time, in summing up, I would just make what is more important is an attitude to continually reskill ourselves, to skill ourselves, to reskill ourselves, to be adaptable and flexible. And this need to be inculcated in the minds of learners, and that would enable them to go a long way. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Singh. We have come back to that really important thread in our discussion as it relates to resilience and the importance, Prof. Kulkarni, as you said to us in the very beginning of this discussion, that we must always be ready to retool, to upskill, and that kind of commitment to continuous learning that we have to really think of when we're looking at Industry 4.0 and beyond. We started actually with the and beyond, and we continued with the Industry 4.0 as we went along. Now, I think anybody who is tuned in, logged on, and listening to us can agree that we could spend an entire, I'm going to say an entire day, perhaps morning, but there's so much that we have really presented here. And we had a challenge from Prof. Kulkarni very early on as it relates to transitioning all of this great work we've been doing with our web jams with Whiteboard Labs and the UWI, with our launch events. And again, for those who tuned in a little late, just to share with you that this is our finale event. And there's more and more that we can do to make sure that we're transitioning this now into action. So we have the research before us today that can actually help us to springboard a lot of what we've been discussing into that action that needs to take place. We have already run beyond our hour in terms of our conversations. So I'm really keen just to hear a few comments as it relates to what we've discussed. I'm sure you've heard from each other some of the things that you'd want to kind of piggyback on, anything that you'd want to kind of challenge perhaps, or to expand on as we close out the panel this morning. Prof. Williams, I know that you have something that you have to go to immediately after this, or perhaps right now, but I'd like to challenge each of you to give us some closing comments and tell us how, just give us, if you can, in a snippet or in a summary, how do we create a modern ecosystem that balances the human element with the technology element? We spoke about the changing needs, the changing employment needs. We spoke a lot about, in a scary way, I think sometimes, big data and how much data is collected and how that informs a lot of what we do. Prof. Kulkarni spoke about the critical thinking skills that we need to have. Danny Roberts told us about the importance of knowing the history that informed the current labor market in which we operate. And Prof. Singh gave us a very specific look at what's happening in his university in Arni as well. So Prof. Williams, I'm going to start with you and ask you if you can just jump in and share with us anything that you want to close with, but also, you know, how do you think we can create this modern ecosystem? It's a balance, really, in my view, and in all that I've listened to this morning.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Owens. Yes, I have to run off shortly, but thank you for that. So, and thank you for all the presenters as well, for all the wonderful thoughts that have been shared with by our colleagues. I would say, if I were to offer any closing summary comments, is that all of this really requires leadership. It requires leadership that has a particular mindset and a particular thinking to pull all of this together, because you'll have to take, as you correctly identified, you have to take the technical versus the soft issues, and you have to put them together in order to balance out what the future labor market would look like. And so it really requires leadership that will have rather that kind of eclecticness about how they think in terms of organizing their workforce. They would also have that global mindset, as I spoke about, because you can't be parochial in this new global labor market. You have to be very, very broad-minded, respect and tolerate diversity in all its forms. You have to also be technologically aware, but you also have to have that human side that you're attaching to this. So therefore, it really requires a kind of leadership that can pull this together. And I would say that is a core of everything at the end of the day, in order to pull all of this together to get that balance that you're talking about.
All right, excellent. And that actually brings us right back to what your final slide was telling us about the importance of leadership and the type of emotional intelligence that's required, the type of readiness for change and resilience that's also required. So we really appreciate that you were able to join us and fit us into your schedule this morning. Our principal, Dr. Longsworth, was also here and had to jump to go to another meeting and extends her apologies, but wanted to share with everyone who's listening that she thoroughly enjoyed the discussion this morning. So thank you very much, PVC Williams.
Enjoyed it as well.
Okay.
Thank you very much, colleagues, and hope to see you around again. Bye-bye.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. All right, so we're going to hop now to Prof. Kulkarni. What are some of your closing thoughts as you listen to all of the discussions this morning on this ecosystem we are challenged to create?
Thank you, Professor, and thank you to every speaker who's come up with so many interesting thoughts, and especially to Professor S.P. Singh. I've been knowing St. John's College, Agra, as one of the premier institutes in North India. I started my career with Defense Research and Development Organization in Agra, which was quite near St. John's College. So I know they've been doing a terrific work. And thanks, sir, for your thoughts. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. as a closing remark, I think Professor Williams has more or less covered, the entire ambit from, zero to infinity actually, and whatever dots remain to be connected were aptly connected by Professor S.P. Singh and other presenters and speakers. Um, but only thing that I would like to add to this is, at some point in time we need to understand, they used to say that no man is an island. I would tell you that no education level is an island. So if we want to succeed in industry 4.0 and beyond, this is the right time when we start looking at what our schools are doing, what our primary education is doing, what our secondary education is doing, what our tertiary end of the day, when children walk out of their schools and get into a premier institutions such as the University of West Indies or the St. John's College, Agra, or lesser universities that I have run in my life, uh, unfortunately, there is a sea change as far as the tradition, the system, and the methodology of learning and teaching is concerned. And then when they pass out from our institutions and go into the industry, trust me, it's a cultural shock. Actually, it's an industrial shock if you really ask me. And the industries are the one who get shocked more than anybody else. So there has to be a connect, and one of the basic connect that I have seen across the globe is I've been working with the education system in Finland and Singapore for the past couple of years. And what has really impressed me in some of the education systems across the globe is, they walk the talk. Unfortunately, Professor S.P. Singh has been there at a premier position for such a long time, so he would understand what I mean. Unfortunately, we talk the walk or we talk the talk, but there are very few organizations in the world who actually, and governments in the world who actually, walk the talk. And Finland, Singapore, Japan, Korea, these are some of the educational institutions and systems that really do that. And let me assure you, you'll be surprised that none of the systems of UK or United States or Canada are in the top 5 education systems in the world as far as the school education is concerned. Because if we talk of critical thinking, we talk of an inquiry-based learning, we talk of the human factors, we talk of multi-processing, we talk of multicultural approach to learning and teaching. This is something where countries like Finland, countries like Estonia, Singapore, Korea, they score well. The PISA scores tell that. And why I am taking you back to the school level is only because we we are supposed to be the ones who would polish these children to be 24 karat, products. Unfortunately, if the raw product that comes to us is not processed properly, we would not be able to do that at the level of higher education. And people like whiteboard labs, they have been doing a terrific job in trying to, somehow mitigate this issue. But then this issue needs to be mitigated right at the school level, and that is how things will start really, really working out. Dr. Sarah, you and your lovely team at UWI, you can really make a difference. And believe you me, it's not difficult to get into one of the top 500 universities in the world. I am a product of Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi, which is out of one of the top 200 in the world. It's been there for such a long time. And it is not because of anything else, except for the fact that you are encouraged to ask questions and you can expect to get answers at such institutions. Thank you very much for your time, and for listening me out. God bless.
Thank you so much. Yes, and I like that you really took us deeper into the ecosystem. So not just from the employability skills, not just from what we're doing in higher education, but touching on something that PVC Williams said as well, that when we're looking at education, that we can't be looking or focusing solely on one area of education. We have to look holistically at preschool, primary school, secondary, coming all the way up, because that's really how we get the entire skilled human that is to emerge into the workplace. So thanks so much for that. Danny Roberts, I'm coming over to you for your closing comments as well, and any thoughts you have on this ecosystem we're discussing before I hand over to Prof. Singh. So Mr. Roberts, what say you?
Thank you very much, Susan. I have about 3 or 4 comments to make. The first one, and Professor Kulkarni mentioned it in his opening, is that Industry 4.0 and beyond is not replacing labor. There will always be a space for labor, perhaps at a much higher level, but that is something that we need to make very, very clear. The second point, again, all speakers refer to, is that the approach for development, particularly for us in the developing world, is that it has to be human-centric. The ILO made that very clear in its report on the future of work, that the quintessential underlying overarching factor in the development of any policy and measures to drive the future of work has to be people-centric or human-centric. The third point I'd make, again, Professor Williams spoke of that, is that again, we in the developing world who have been the subject of colonial rule and have a recent history of independence, 50, 60 years, we have to recognize that there has to be an attempt to decolonize our education system. Professor Williams spoke about the changing of the curriculum. I want to say a decolonization of our education system. Because part of that must include, again, a comment made by all speakers, the critical thinking skills. It is in a sense unfair to university students for us to now set questions that require critical thinking when the foundation of their learning was not based upon that. It puts them at a distinct disadvantage. And the final point I would make revolves around the question of leadership. Because if we don't have the kind of leadership that recognizes the importance of making the change in a way that creates what has been a feature of the ideal of human existential reality, questions of equality, social justice, egalitarianism, that we have to recognize, certainly in the Caribbean, that the structure of our economy bequeathed to us by colonialism has not made sufficient radical change to address those issues. And the pandemic provides an opportunity for us to reshape our economies in a way that addresses those fundamental issues. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Danny. I like that we are digging deep here today. I recently looked at something that spoke to the importance of having courage in leadership, and that you can't have courage without vulnerability. And I think that it's very easy to look at spreadsheets and systems and data, but really what we have to do is dig a bit deeper than that. We have to look at the history. We have to look at the structures that were built that we need to radically change and shift, and that we need to really, I think that we tend to, this is my own view here, and as moderator, I'm not panelist, so, but I'm just kind of adding in my own view that, we often speak about this very palatable reform, and we really need to speak about something perhaps much more revolutionary than that to change things in a much more dramatic and drastic way. Otherwise, we won't be able to build on the systems that we need. We really need to do a lot of the foundational changes. I agree with you entirely, Mr. Roberts. So I'm going to hand over to Prof. S.P. Singh to hear from him what his closing comments to us may be.
Professor Williams has very aptly talked about the role of leadership in creating an ecosystem for transformation. And he also said that probably we needn't be scared of the rapid changes, for jobs are not going to become obsolete. Professor Kulkarni talked about the entire educational ecosystem and the different nodes of that ecosystem, how they can together in synergy contribute to the critical skills that are required in a learner. Dr. Robert talked about decolonizing academia. And very interestingly, if we see the modern academia or the world of industry 4.0, a learner has been empowered, and an empowered learner equipped and augmented with the capabilities of critical thinking, creativity, ability to process information, access knowledge, and create channels for communication. Probably all kinds of egalitarianism, whether it be decolonization, whether it is gender egalitarianism or articulation of the marginalized voices, or probably harmonious globalization, approach to globalization, that would require to be embedded within how the ethos that the academia should be run. And I believe that probably this is where we need to have a strong ethical base, because the world ahead, I believe, would require skills of resilience. And the resilience will come. It is important to be a rooted individual to be resilient, rooted in certain ethical values, rooted in one's own, rooted and secure in one's own identity, rooted and secure so that one can honor, respect, harmoniously deal with others, and create a workplace which is harmonious. At the same time, there has to be an attitude of flexibility. There has to be an attitude of comprehensive learning. And I believe that with the leadership at different levels, because one more thing we see is that as the knowledge is expanding, an individual is not turning into only a passive consumer of knowledge, but a producer of knowledge as well. His sphere of influence is increasing, and the leadership potential is correspondingly growing. Therefore, it becomes important for us to constantly be proactive in bringing in those attitudinal shifts. And we look forward to a leadership that would harmonize various nodes through which we would see the transformation of Industry 4.0 to the ideals that have been envisaged in Industry 5.0. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Prof. Singh. I think that Ashish, who is up next, will agree with me that you all have given us actually through this discussion, we have charted a path that will inform a lot of the curriculum that we'll develop together as we continue to push our theme of Industry 4.0 and beyond. Thanks so much, Prof. S.P. Singh. So I'm now going to hand over to Ashish, who will bring a few closing remarks of gratitude to the team before we close out our discussion today. Over to you, Ashish.
Thank you, Sarah. Good evening once again to our audience and panelists. In this such a short time, we have heard a discussion between the greats of academia. I hope our takeaways are useful. We have talked about a future economy, a future in jobs, and in a future of how we live. The pandemic has also shown us one thing: go back to the basics. And this panel has also shown us how to do that. On behalf of WhiteBoard Labs India and University of West Indies and the entire fraternity of the institution, first of all, I extend my most sincere thanks to Professor Williams, Dr. S.P. Singh, Mr. D. Roberts, and Professor S.N. Kulkarni. Thank you so much. I'll take this opportunity to give my humble gratitude to Professor Harold McDougall and Dr. Luz Longsworth and Dr. Rohit Sipson to create the UWI and WBL Center of Excellence to visioning the future of the East and the West Indies. Our humble regards and thank you for the council members, including Mr. Shiv Tohan, Mr. Dinesh, Mr. Charles Maynard, Mr. Aditya Vidyasagar, Ms. Akshita Shukla, Dr. Safia Mohammed, and our UWI and WBL team, including Dr. Cleven Sam, Mr. Riaz Baldev, Ms. Anisha, Ms. Jody Grizel, Mr. Kevin, Ms. Shalini, Ms. Richa, Ms. Shobha, and my apologies if I missed any name. Moving forward, and in last, I'll conclude this event with my best regards and humble gratitude to Dr. Susan Sarah Owen for her great support to plan whether academia side or marketing planning side. She always extended her support and guidance unconditionally, always and all the time. Thank you so much, Sarah. We are all in a state of flux, but our teams are trained and ready to work with you to find a customized path for students, the workforce, companies, the organization to help chart the road ahead. We are coming with our competency courses and curriculum under Industry 4.0, entering into 5.0 by the detailed information will announce 15 June 2021. Till then, leaving you all with a quote of Confucius, which I received from Dr. Susan Sarah Owen. Education breeds confidence. Confidence breeds hope, and hope breeds peace. Till that, good night, good day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ashish, and good night, good day, good morning to everyone. Watch this space. There'll be a lot more to come from Whiteboard Labs and the UWI as we continue our work in Industry 4.0 and beyond. Thank you so much, everybody.